Growing up in the early 2000s, the WWE was hands down one of the biggest cultural spectacles both for adolescents and adults alike. The World Wrestling Entertainment franchise seemed once something of an American staple. At one point averaging well over 5 million concurrent viewers, the WWE was a genuinely beloved American tradition, regarded as really a national treasure of sorts for many teens. But over the years, not only has the WWE had a serious loss in viewership, they've had a glaring decline in quality as well, outwardly contradicting everything that made people enjoy pro wrestling to begin with. It's apparent to anyone and everyone that the WWE is simply not the same sport it once was years ago. There's been a distinct change in energy you can feel, and it's not just because we've gotten older. Through the span of the 2010s, the WWE has gone from John Cena being every kid's idol to now not even being able to sell enough tickets for even their biggest of events. And in this video, we're going to go over what happened along the way that made an industry that felt unstoppable only a mere few years ago turn into a joke of a performance with dwindling viewership. Also, since I'm talking about various time periods of pro wrestling, just to keep things concise, I'm still going to refer to the WWE as the WWE, even if at the time it went under a different title, just to keep things easy to follow along with. To start, let's go all the way back to the early 80s, when a man named Vince McMahon would first take over the family business of Capital Wrestling, marking the beginning of the WWE golden era as we know it today. Now, I know in recent memory, McMahon doesn't exactly have a great public perception due to an onslaught of various very serious allegations, but putting that all aside, McMahon is no contest innately vital for building the WWE up into being the powerhouse it once was. See, Vince McMahon was the very first person to ever have a greater vision for what we could do with pro wrestling as a form of entertainment. He would be the frontrunner to fundamentally change the sport of wrestling as people knew it, to take a once narrow industry and monopolize it. Upon gaining ownership over the WWE sanction, Vince would immediately get to work on getting the enterprise onto television, trying to put pro wrestling in front of the greatest number of eyes he possibly could, which surprisingly at first was a controversial move, as at the time wrestling was a regional exclusive sport, and McMahon's ambitions to make wrestling a more collective competition on a national level angered many promoters who were extremely territorial over their respective districts. Regardless, this move to further unite pro wrestling under one big televised umbrella would prove to be maybe the single greatest decision in WWE history, but it didn't happen right away. McMahon still had to prove himself and his vision for what pro wrestling could be on the small scale before he could ever attempt to put it on the big screen. So McMahon, being a very savvy promoter, made sure to only employ acts who knew how to sell a fight. He realized early on that everything that happened out of the ring was 10 times more important than whatever happened inside it. People are much more inclined to watch a fight with someone they're initially entertained by, even more than someone who might be even fundamentally better. The power of having a fan who is super passionate about a particular fighter is infinitely more profitable than someone who just likes pro wrestling. So with this fact in mind, McMahon would originally start recruiting now legendary wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, people who had that stage presence and charisma, fighters who just simply had that it factor, people that were able to entice and capture a much wider audience. And off the back of its most popular entertainers, enough revenue was being made to secure a few television deals, which would finally bring pro wrestling to the masses. However, even while thriving commercially, if Vince wanted to truly turn the WWE into a national promotion, he needed to have his franchise touring the whole US, which simply wasn't possible with the current income levels. So here McMahon devised a new idea to vastly increase sales, putting all his eggs in one basket as far as funds went.
It was a huge gamble, the biggest gamble I've ever been involved with. It was a roll of the dice.
Really genuinely risking everything on a new event in 1985, he coined WrestleMania. One event every year that's supposed to be the end-all be-all for deciding the champion. And this particular event really cannonballed the WWE into the mainstream, with only the third WrestleMania at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan having a record 93,000 people in attendance to see Hulk Hogan go against Andre the Giant in the championship match. Then again, later that year in a rematch event between the two wrestlers, there would be a whopping 33 million viewers watching, the highest in the history of the sport. At this point, the WWE was inescapable, launching a slew of new successful annual events, with fan-favorite wrestlers becoming outright celebrities by then. They would ride this high all throughout the 80s and into the 90s, signing new iconic wrestlers that would only aid in building up their wrestling empire. The 90s would also see the matches become a lot more theatrical in their delivery, with having more emphasis on character storylines and development. And of course, wrestler feuds, where a talent named Stone Cold Steve Austin would rise to superstardom. Originally being set up as the villain of the wrestling universe, Austin became so popular he would eventually become the face of the brand, almost like the 90s equivalent to Hulk Hogan. Instead, McMahon would characterize himself as being the villain of the organization, becoming a prominent character in the WWE sphere outside of the ring. Towards the end of the 90s, they would start to experiment with more mature tropes, including sexual content, profanity, more complex storylines and curves, and greater emphasis on violence, which would see ratings for the network steadily increase over time, as the WWE, through trial and error, was able to have a good understanding of what makes their events tick. But while this most certainly was a high point here in the 90s, there would simultaneously begin to be cracks in the once uncontroversial sport. The first major scandal would be when Vince McMahon was hit with a massive lawsuit, conspiring him of roiding up his wrestlers and pressuring all performers to go under the needle in order to keep their jobs. It was very obvious to anyone watching that many of the most popular wrestlers were all in some way or another not natural. The physical dominance of one's build went a long way towards how popular they were, and moreover how much they eventually got paid. So of course, realizing this, many wrestlers would start taking steroids in order to improve their physique and their performance, all in attempts to gain popularity among fans. In 1991, Dr. George Zaharian, a prominent ringside doctor for the WWE, had been convicted of illegally supplying wrestlers with anabolic steroids. And after Zaharian cooperating with prosecutors, the DEA was able to indict McMahon in 1993 on similar charges. He was hit with possession of illegal steroids, intent to deliver illegal steroids, and embezzlement of money to purchase illegal steroids. One of the company's biggest names, Hulk Hogan, would come out to testify on behalf of McMahon, claiming that while he had been taking steroids, eventually, after a 16-hour trial, McMahon was ultimately found not guilty on all charges. However, this whole ordeal would still put a massive taint on the WWE's reputation. This case was heavily covered in the press, and even though found not guilty, people still didn't look at pro wrestling quite the same.
Most of us think of professional wrestling as harmless entertainment and Hulk Hogan as the king of the ring. But was there a sinister side to his success? Some people now claim that his hard-muscled good guy image really came from his past use of dangerous drugs.
The WWE started enforcing their drug policy much stricter to avoid further discourse, which many fans of the towering Macho Men style of wrestling many people had become accustomed to were not fans of. Also during this time, steep competition began emerging. Most prominently, the WCW had given the WWE a serious run for their money. The WCW was a new competitor wrestling league that had a lot of very wealthy backers behind it. They purposely aired at similar times to the WWE to take away their audience, which to some degree worked for well over a year, outperforming the WWE in user ratings. They even recruited their golden boy Hulk Hogan during this time, which was a huge blow for the optics of the franchise. It looks really bad when your star player player switches sides. But even with these bumps in the road, the WWE still proved to be an unstoppable force with the inception of the Attitude Era. Easily the most commercially successful time for the company, with acts like John Cena and The Rock coming up in the Attitude Era and becoming global superstars. This particular era got its name because, as a way to compete with the WCW, the WWE became incessantly more crude and wild, having even more offensive humor and sexuality, crazier backstories and performances, and above all else, much more violence. Fans found this segment in the WWE timeline super entertaining, showcasing some of their best ideas and most memorable moments. Also, as the Attitude Era progressed, not only were fans engaged, but they made considerably more money. The WWE saw its revenue become 5 times higher, the people in attendance at the average event more than doubled, and the number of people who paid per view at events nearly tripled. This is most wrestling fans' favorite time of the sport, and for good reason. During this time, it just simply was way more fun to be a fan of pro wrestling. But with every commercial peak, there's bound to be a come down, and this would begin to occur towards the end of the Attitude Era, where Vince McMahon would change the WWE from being a private-owned company to a public one. This meant that they were now offering new stocks to any and all potential investors, opening the door for new lenders to get in on the once private shares. They did this as a way to further their revenue and begin to expand into uncharted territories that wouldn't be possible without outside support. See, as Vince McMahon is vastly loyal to his star-studded empire, he is still a businessman at the end of the day and wanted to further venture forth into new media forms, which in hindsight was a really misguided move, with most of Vince's side projects not ending desirably, most notably of which the XFL costing McMahon tens of millions of dollars. Then, following the end of the Attitude Era, the next saga dubbed the Ruthless Aggression Era would see the WWE begin to lose its grip on its once tight-knit fandom. While this era is generally liked among fans and revenue was still good, it was undoubtedly a regression from what they had achieved in the Attitude Era. A lot of the most popular characters from the previous years were now nowhere to be seen, and many fans just generally became less interested in what was going on in the ring. In general, this was a pretty mixed bag couple of years when it came to public opinion that did see the WWE have an overall loss in average viewership, but it wasn't anything too drastic. It wouldn't be until the beginning of the PG era that everyone would universally agree the WWE took a utter nosedive in quality. After McMahon went through a failed political career and a new onslaught of damning scandals, particularly the Chris Benoit tragedy in which a wrestler would murder both himself and his wife and his 7-year-old son, Vince was at a crossroads for what he had to do with this company. He knew if he didn't remodel his business practice, it would only swell up and boil into further and further controversy. And at this point, obviously not being a private stock anymore, McMahon also had to keep shareholders and advertisers satisfied with what went on screen. So in attempts to rebrand the WWE name, in 2008, the franchise would cut all ties with their previously edgy delivery in favor of a much brand safer, family-friendly, PG-rated event, which only led the already dwindling audience base to stop watching entirely, as now along with this new PG rating, it was also accompanied by some of the worst performances and angles in the sport's history. I mean, pretty much everything that made the WWE entertaining was all sucked away just to appeal to a wider audience. All the cringiest moments in the sport's history came from this time period, and while initially the WWE did see a spike in viewership at the debut of this new PG rating, obviously now being able to appeal to a whole new demographic, there's bound to be a flock of new children and families who will check it out and raise initial watch hours, but over time the average viewership steadily decreased until they saw record low numbers for the first time in decades. In the years from 2000, the latter half of the Attitude Era, to 2010, the middle of the PG era, viewership for Monday Night Raw, one of their biggest broadcasts, dropped nearly in half, which has only continued to lower up until today, as well as SmackDown losing an average of 1 million concurrent viewers every 5 years during roughly the same time frame. time. As while now they were more marketable to a broader audience, this complete change in demeanor and energy would only go to alienate their core audience. But a more watered down, less violent approach to wrestling is way more advertiser friendly than a violent bloodbath packed with swearing and adult themes. So while fans and critics alike both lament this change to be coming, with Vince McMahon being a businessman above all else, he was totally willing to ignore. This PG era was rated by far the least favorite saga of fans on a poll from the official WWE page, and ticket sales reflect that as well, with many people becoming less engaged inside the WWE universe. Ratings for all their broadcasts plummeted through these years, with not only longtime fans not being happy with the current direction, younger fans watching for the first time were not falling in love with the same on-screen shenanigans older fans were blessed to once have grown up with. Which I think is really the core reason why pro wrestling, still even to this day, only keeps declining in viewership. If you simply can't excite the youth and build new fans, you're only going to keep gradually being left out of the bigger picture as time progresses. Since the beginning of the PG rating and thus PG era, the WWE has gone through two more era changes, from 2014 to 2016 going through the reality era, and then from 2016 up until now being dubbed simply the new era. In the grand scheme of the company's long history, these years are pretty uneventful, at least compared to others, and just followed a similar pattern as the PG era, with declining ratings, declining ticket sales, and hugely declining viewership. In fact, from 2020 up until now, WWE Raw has rarely cracked 2 million average viewers in any given month, usually averaging from 1.5 to 1.8 million, with WWE SmackDown only being slightly higher. And as kind of a final blow to any longtime consumers, in July of 2022, Vince McMahon would officially resign his position as being the CEO of WWE, a position he held for a damning 40 years at that point. This would come amidst a tremendous lawsuit where McMahon is being accused of some heinous crimes, including abuse and sex trafficking, having paid over $12 million in hush money to multiple women as to not come forth with any testimonials against him or the WWE estate. I'm not going to get too into this lawsuit, as one, it's still ongoing, and as of right now, Vince is not guilty, so I don't feel comfortable speaking on accusations, even if they do seem to have a lot of evidence behind them. And two, that's really not the point of the overall video. I more so want to focus on the WWE as its own linear entity. Regardless, whether found guilty or not, with Vince now leaving the WWE enterprise, something many people thought wouldn't happen until the day he died, any and all creative ideas had now been under others' control, which has led to some pretty mixed opinion among fans. I mean, financially, the WWE sits as being pretty much idiot-proof no matter who's the owner, having no serious competition or any struggle to find advertising. But others argue Vince McMahon is the WWE, and anything he's not the mastermind behind takes away from that. The WWE is still experiencing a general decline of overall interest, at least as far as viewership goes. As far as audience reception, right now it actually appears to be at least not as universally hated since the beginning of the PG era, with, as I said earlier, many fans are happy to see new creative control, but simultaneously, many fans are very much not happy about it. It's really kind of up in the air for where it goes from here. I don't really see a world where the WWE ever becomes completely irrelevant, at least, as no matter what, there will always be an audience for pro wrestling, even if there's not as big an appetite for it now as there once was. And as far as legacy goes, it's hard to not feel like the WWE has let fans down, with the once beloved CEO crashing out in a very unsatisfying, if found guilty, despicable fashion, as well as shelling out all the very things people liked about the WWE, all just to make more money with advertising and because they simply could. It will never be the same as it was in the late 90s and 2000s, but so long as it keeps trudging along, keeping pro wrestling alive, I guess there is at least some solace to be found in that. If you guys did enjoy the video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Being a smaller creator myself, that really does help out a ton. You you guys don't even know. I got another video on the way, a ton of other videos on my channel you guys should definitely go check out. They're really great, but other than that, yep, stay safe everyone, peace.